Hello there, and welcome to the Sunday MLB Waiver Wire Q&A. My name is Chris Crawford. Thank you to everybody who is joining us on Circling the Bases. Once again, joke doesn't get old. My name is still Chris Crawford on that format as well. I am joined once again by my good buddy George Bissell. George, how's it going?
What's going on, Chris? Unfortunately, we don't have an actual MLB leadoff game to talk about today, but there's still a lot going on. So it's that fun time of the year where you're close to the postseason. There's some potential storylines to monitor. There's just kind of a lot going on, and you can get lost if you tune out for a little bit. So it's a good time of the year to kind of check in on things.
It is a good time in the year, but unfortunately, no baseball game today. The scheduled game between the Cleveland Guardians and the Chicago White Sox has been postponed due to inclement weather. It took a long time to postpone this one, George. The game was supposed to start at 9:05 Pacific time. Yes, I'm saying Pacific time. I'm forcing my time zone onto this podcast. And I think they canceled it right at exactly 12 o'clock. Like almost, or if not exactly 12 o'clock, very close to exactly 12 o'clock.
Unplayable field conditions.
Unplayable field conditions.
So they might have been able to wait it out, but the field just wasn't going to respond. You could dump like 200 pounds of drying agent on the field. It's not gonna It's not gonna matter today.
Here's a question for you. Now, for those of you who listened to our podcast last Tuesday, I debuted Hot Take McGee. I'm asking you for a hot take. Well, not a hot take per se. Maybe. Do you think that Cleveland should have a retractable roof?
I think almost every team should. I think the benefits outweigh the drawbacks. I mean, the nice I like Houston's with the retractable roof. So Toronto has one. So I think Milwaukee does now too, I believe
So.
A lot of the newer stadiums, they're going in that direction. I think unless there's a historical reason to not do it, like I can't imagine Wrigley Field or Fenway with a roof, but most places it makes a lot of sense, especially those colder weather climates. So I think they should do it.
Yeah, I think they should too. And I totally look. Here's what I'll say. Hot Take McGee also will say that these are very expensive things. I can remember as an old man that the 1999, the stadium that got built for the Mariners after their 1995 run for the stadium in 1999.
Yeah, the old Kingdom.
The old Kingdom, that awful, decrepit, wonderful place that had just absolutely zero amenities whatsoever, but it was such a fun place to go watch a game, even though the seats were facing the wrong way. It was all made for football, so you'd be staring at home plate like this. For those of you who are not watching the podcast, this wasn't a great visual for you, but that's okay. But it was a big deal because that retractable roof was a super expensive thing. It took a $350 million stadium. And remember, these are 1997, 1998 dollars into a $517 million stadium in 1998, 1999 dollars. So that's a big difference. So I will say, I get it. It's an expensive thing, but it's also preventing you from having games played.
So as a New Englander, there's a lot of talk about the financial state of the Boston Red Sox around here. And I can tell
financial flexibility.
Yes. Nobody's gone broke owning a baseball team since the inception of Major League Baseball. Nobody has ever gone out of business running a baseball team. So this is a profitable industry. So every team can afford to pay whoever it is, X player, X expense. They can afford to do it. It's just a question of whether they want to. So, I think that's the direction most of these newer stadium projects are going in, though.
So what George and I are both saying, and I'm going to put words in his mouth, is retractable roof, not paid for by taxpayers, paid for by MLB owners. You can add us at Keith Law if you disagree with that. I think it's silly. Cleveland is one of those places, like Minnesota as well. I think Minnesota should probably have one. That ballpark is so gorgeous, and I understand they're not the most attractive things in the world, those retractable roofs. I mean, they're not. They take away kind of from the open feel of the stadium, even when they're not being put out. But man, it's frustrating because these are two teams that are competing for a couple of different playoff spots here, and now they're going to have to make adjustments to their pitching staff when this game ends up being made up. I don't know if they both have a common off day or not, but even if they do, something that was supposed to be a scheduled off day, we're talking about rain delays on a podcast. Can you believe that, George?
Yeah, so that's one of the wrinkles that's going to come into play here. Because remember, we also had the first week of the season postponed because of the lockout. It got pushed back. So there are also a lot of teams are still in the process of making up those games down the home stretch too. So you're basically running out of mutual off days is what's going to be. It's going to be a scheduling logistical doubleheader nightmare. And we saw this during, I want to say, the pandemic shortened season too, where there were just a lot of doubleheaders, which was, fine for us on the content side of things. Things went quickly. But it's a long day of baseball for these teams, and you're already seeing it with injuries to pitching staffs. Like the Mets, for example, they lose 2 starters in about 3 days, and all of a sudden, they're calling up guys out of AAA just to try to fill innings. So and that was with having 2 competent guys in Trevor Williams and David Peterson coming up and pitching well, and it's kind of going to get chaotic here in the last month or so.
It is going to be chaotic. It's going to be fun chaotic, but when you can avoid this kind of chaos, I think it's worth pointing out. Speaking of that in absolutely no way whatsoever, for those of you who are joining us live, please drop your fantasy questions, drop your questions about our opinions on different kinds of roofs. Do we like solar panels? Do we like the textile? Like what's our personal favorite type of shingle? Like, feel free to drop those questions for us. Please don't drop us any questions about any type of shingles whatsoever. But yeah, absolutely. If you guys have any questions at all, please feel free to drop it. I wanted to ask you about. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, this is the show. We're an open forum today. This is, all requests will be met with open arms.
Unfortunately, we were planning on talking about this game because it was a big game. Like, the White Sox really need to win this series to get back into things. Who would you make the favorite in the AL Central right now?
I mean, just going off the top of my head, I like Minnesota's pitching staff, but they lost Tyler Mahle yesterday. They ended up having to put him on the injured list, so it doesn't sound like he's going to require a lengthy absence. But they've kind of done some things on the fringes of their roster. The bullpen hasn't been as good as I would have expected, given some of the moves they made. But I think they're in a good position. Chicago just has a lot of injuries, and losing Yasmani Grandal, it seems like, based on the initial reporting today, he underwent further testing, that he's avoided the worst case scenario with the knee issue. But he's a guy who's had knee and back problems this year, so it's just going to be difficult for them to forecast, him coming back and playing every day, I think, especially when you have guys who are already banged up that are limited to playing designated hitter, like Eloy Jimenez, who's been dealing with problems recently. Sure. Luis Robert has the wrist issue going on, so there's a lot of complicating factors for the White Sox. And I just think at the end of the day, if it comes down to it and they're in the mix towards the very end of it, they might have the starting pitching to be able to push them over the finish line. Because if you put like Dylan Cease in a 1-game situation against anybody else in that division, you got to think he's going to be the guy who's going to get it done. So they might have the best pitching staff, but I just don't know. There's too many questions of the lineup for me right now. They have a lot of injuries going on.
Over under 1.5 teams from the AL Central making the postseason.
Well, I'd say under, just because you have the American League East at this point, where you got to figure, like New York, all of a sudden, this is that might be the biggest story in baseball right now. All of a sudden, the division's not over. If they've lost 8 of their last 10, they've been really bad since the All-Star break. So yeah. I mean, it's only a 7-game lead, which is not insurmountable. It's a lot, but I mean, it's doable.
Sure.
So I think Toronto, Tampa Bay, Baltimore, they're still in it. The Red Sox are kind of fading here. I don't know if they're going to be able to get it done, but I like the American League East. I think those are some of the better teams at this point. So I think I'd go under on that, the Central.
I think so too. I mean, it wouldn't shock me just because none of these teams, every time one of these teams I think is starting to run away with something or fall out of it, they kind of make a run. I will say this, it kind of looks like that my grandma's Seattle Mariners might be a lock for the postseason right now, which is kind of fun. I think we're getting 2 from that division. And then I think we will get the other 3 from the American League East. So I think we're talking New York, Toronto, Tampa, whoever wins the Central. I lean Minnesota like you do. I'm kind of maybe rooting for Minnesota more than anything else, to be completely honest with you. I just really have liked what they have done in the offseason and with these trades. And really, really good uniforms. And then I think they're getting 2 from the West. I mean, Houston is the lock of locks here to make the postseason, and the New York Yankees are as well. I will say this. It's interesting on ESPN for the playoff odds. New York they used to have the little carrot pointing towards 99.9. They are only 99.9% playoff odds right now. So things are, but I will say too, my good friend Lindsay Adler of The Athletic had a very funny tweet that I think went over a bunch of people's heads. She put like a Dateline thing while taking a picture of Yankee Stadium as Chernobyl, which is really funny because, man, I did not see this coming, George. They looked so good for the majority of this season, but in the second half, they have been not just a bad for a good team, they've been a bad baseball team.
Yeah, so the issue with the Yankees is the offense, right? They've been shut out a couple of times in the last few games. You've seen Aaron Judge kind of go into a little bit of a slump. I don't think it's been his fault necessarily. He was playing so well to start the year that it's kind of unrealistic to expect him to keep doing that for an entire season. So there was going to come a point, every hitter goes into a little bit of a slump at some point. So that kind of hit at the worst possible point for them after losing Stanton to the Achilles issue a couple of weeks ago. They haven't gotten much out of Andrew Benintendi. Anthony Rizzo has kind of come back to earth. He was really hot to start the year. And the bottom of that lineup, I mean, just go through some of the names. After you get past Josh Donaldson, Gleyber Torres is fine. DJ LeMahieu's not like a impact superstar at this point at a leadoff spot. He's kind of doesn't give you too much there other than the on-base percentage. But, the bottom of that lineup, Trevino's cooled off. Kiner-Falefa hasn't done anything. They're kind of resisting calling up Peraza. So, I mean, that's as much as the Yankee fans want to see it. They're giving Oswaldo Cabrera a chance, and he's been versatile. He started like 4 different positions the last 4 days. So he's made a couple really nice plays. He had a nice grab in foul territory yesterday. So I think he can play and stopgap it. But, yeah, they're going to get into the postseason, but I don't know if they're going to be the 1 or the 2 seed. There's a chance they don't finish that high up, and they might fall out of the division lead here if Toronto keeps playing well.
Yeah, I mean, again, I thought this was the lock of locks that they were going to win this division. I mean, they just looked so complete, and it hasn't been the stars falling apart. It's just that, a good roster has played mediocre baseball and worse than that in the second half of the season. And like you said, this is not the 1998 to 2000 Yankees. This is a team that has some stars, but then some guys that just are like average humdrum major league players as well that are not playing at a superstar level. And I will go ahead.
I want to say this happened a couple of years ago. Wasn't there a good piece about how some of the ancillary depth for a team like the Brewers, where they just didn't have any positions where a guy was just so far below the baseline replacement level?
Sure.
I think that's been the issue for the Yankees, like you're talking about. Their depth just has been tested to the point that they're getting sub-replacement level production out of several spots. And at a certain point, no matter how good your superstars are, just ask the Angels, you can't overcome having just automatic outs in your lineup or sub replacement level pitchers. It's just not a sustainable way to go about things for a long period of time.
No, it's not. And I'm going to transition from that. By the way, shout out for the word ancillary. Boy,
thesaurus corner.
Way to make the host feel dumb. The opposite of that has been Alex Bregman as of late. So over his last 13 games, and we're going for over a 2-week sample here. Alex Bregman is hitting 375, 455, 833 with 5 homers. He's walked 6 times. He's only struck out 4 times. He's even added a stolen base. So Alex Bregman is not far removed, George, from being a fantasy star. And the last couple of seasons, he's been more like a good but not great player. In fact, nowhere close to a great player. But he certainly is playing like a great player as of late. How confident are you that Alex Bregman can be? I'm not asking you to say, can he put up a 1.288 OPS for the rest of the season? Because that's just ridiculous. But how confident are you that we're seeing that flash of that superstar Alex Bregman first round pick guy? Can we see that for the rest of the year?
I always say no because he doesn't steal bases. So It's really tough from a pure fantasy retrospective valuation standpoint. He's not going to grade out where some of these other guys who are going to give you 10 or 15 stolen bases. He has one steal, I think, this season. If I'm just, exactly one. So
it came in the last 2 weeks.
he that's fine. You can still be a 4-category fantasy superstar. Look at Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and he'll even give you a handful. But Nolan Arenado was like this. If Paul Goldschmidt doesn't run at all, he's one of those guys. So those guys tend to max out. Peak JD Martinez was this way. You can max out as a second, third round selection annually. That's easily within the range of outcomes for a guy like Bregman. The issue he had the last couple of seasons wasn't skills related. It wasn't like all of a sudden the plate skills disappeared or he had some bad ball luck that didn't go his way. He had physical issues. I want to say he had a hamstring issue last year that I think cost him about 2 months. So this is a guy who got hurt a bunch, and they were kind of fluky injuries. It was calves, hamstrings, stuff like that. You couldn't really predict. So if you just look at, go under the hood at what he was doing with the plate skills, they were fine. It's just he's got to get back to hitting for that elite type of power where if he's a 30 home run hitter annually, he's going to be an early round selection. But if he doesn't do that, it's going to be tough for him to get to that point because he doesn't do some of the other things like stealing bases or hitting for a high average. He does get on base a lot, but that doesn't matter in traditional 5x5 fantasy formats. So, I think he can get there. He's really good. There's no question about that. But the margin for error with him based on the skills and the production is a little more narrow than some of the other guys you look at in the early rounds.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, this guy has such elite plate skills. Like his approach at the plate is so good. Like for the last couple of years, I'm sure he's ranked at the top or near the top in the walk percentage, the whiff percentage, and the chase rate. In fact, his chase rate on Baseball Savant this year is in that 100th percentile. He doesn't strike out a ton. He also doesn't make a ton of hard contact. And that's been true for his career. Like this is not a guy who just sting line drives all over the park, in part because he is a guy who is willing to hit in 2 strike counts, and hitters who hit in 2 strike counts, they're going to get, the best pitch from somebody in that willingness to draw a walk and hopefully get that meatball that you can hit over the fence. Like I'm optimistic about Alex Bregman being a top 7 or 8 third baseman, especially we've talked about it in the last few podcasts, George. Third base is just such a bad position right now. But the fact that he doesn't run and the fact that, 18 homers this year, obviously the power is coming on. But he's going to have to be, I think, in order to be a top 25 type player, a guy who's hitting closer to 30 to 35 home runs, no?
Yeah. I mean, he's so good at taking advantage of his ballpark. He and Jose Altuve have really mastered that. When they get a pitch that they can pull, and this is what Brian Dozier did so well for all those years. He understood when he got a pitch to pull, he pulled it and hit it out. I mean, that's what Bregman does such a nice job of, and that really helps boost his home run totals, I think. So, he can get there. It's just if, like I said, if he ends up with an injury where he misses a chunk of time, he doesn't have the opportunity to build up those counting stats, which are going to push him into that early round range. So it's just difficult when you look at from a valuation standpoint. That's why you always talk about you want to prioritize guys who can give you stolen bases because it's just such a hard skill set to come by in this era of the game.
So let's talk about somebody who's going to give you plenty of stolen bases in Vinnie Pascalentino. Now, he's not going to give you any stolen bases, unfortunately, but he's looked so good at the plate, George. And this was a guy that I was super high on after talking to some scouts last year. And then he had the ridiculous spring training, got off to kind of a slow start. But over his last 15 days, this is a player who's hitting 405, 479, 786, has hit 5 home runs, is walking more than he has struck out. Vinnie Pascalentino, is he a first baseman 1 to open up the 2023 season?
I think he's right on the border of it. First base is crazy deep at the moment, but I think he's there. This isn't, there's been a lot of commentary about, guys like Jared Walsh and, people like that in the last few years coming on as sort of breakout guys. And their skill sets were, I think, a little more flawed than we see with a guy like Pascalentino, where he kind of just does everything well. The plate skills, like you said, they're so good that, and this was something he was doing in the minors. It's translated to the highest level. I don't think this is a sort of a small sample fluke at the moment. He's up to 200 plate appearances now almost. and has been one of the elite guys at controlling the strike zone.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime you showcase that kind of ability, it's real in some capacity. So yeah, I think so. The power's there. I mean, this is I don't want to do the comps thing, but it's hard to find hitters who come up and do this and look that good. So yeah, I'd be pretty confident in him moving forward. This is kind of who we thought Spencer Torkelson was going to be a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I am still super high on Spencer Torkelson going forward. He just hasn't figured out the right way. The approach is he's too passive right now. He's going to have to figure out how to drive the baseball all the time in the world for him to figure that out. My concern with Vinnie Pascalentino long term is I think he might be a DH. Like he's already in bottom 13th percentile in sprint speed. Now you don't have to be super fast to play first base, obviously. You just got to be quick enough to go cover the bag, but not a great athlete. However, this is the rare guy that I would be like, oh, this guy, even if he's going to be utility, I really want him in my lineup because his approach is so good and the power, he's still kind of tapping into that power. Like, I think this could be a guy in his best seasons, depending on how baseball works. We're going to have to see what exactly goes on with the baseballs and how we have changes with the shift and stuff like that. But he could be a 40 homer guy, or if not, he could be among the league leaders in homers. He has that kind of power. And he's not just a grip and rip guy. Like he will use the entire field. I'm looking at his baseball savant page. He has a good number of hits to the opposite field. Now he hasn't shown the power to the opposite field yet. Every home run is to right center, and beyond to the right. I bet you that he's going to be just fine in that. Like if you could start to pitch the opposite way, I think he's going to make enough hard contact for power. It's interesting you talk about first base. It is kind of a loaded position now, isn't it?
Yeah. You can go 10, 12, 15 deep and find impact guys. So there's no shortage there. I've heard the Paul Goldschmidt comp a lot, but what do you think of this one? What do you think of like Pete Kendrys Morales, like that type of skill set?
Yeah, I like that a lot.
That's who he kind of reminds me of.
Yeah, I think that I abhor comps, but I think that's a really good one. Our good buddy Shelly asked a really good question. Vinny P or Jose Miranda rest of season? What you got, George?
I love Jose Miranda, and that is, remember in the preseason we get asked to do our sleepers, and most of us had him unranked at third base. I had him ranked, and I was the highest, and I was like, well, I don't know. Dude hits, and he's done that. He's a weird one because he started off so bad and then he got sent down, and it was like, okay, that's over. You so if you drafted him and held on to him in the start of the year, you probably let go of him, which is unfortunate. But he's been phenomenal the last couple of months. So I like Miranda. Plus, he can play multiple positions. Pasquantino probably is probably a safer skill set. Like the floor is probably much higher. But for Miranda, if he's clicking, like the plate skills aren't impressive. But if he's getting batted ball luck and hitting for power, that's like you're talking huge ceiling there. So I just like Miranda a lot. I feel kind of vindicated that like that's one we got right. Like like, he was a tough guy to figure out because the minor league numbers were so good and so unexpected that was like, I could see this cratering, but he kind of pulled it off. So and everyone who covers that team, who talks to the players on that team, they say that he's the real deal. So I tend to read into that a little bit too. Like there's some good Carlos Correa quotes about him that they're like, this guy's a dude. So those guys know when they see it. So
they do. And that I was a guy who was skeptical in part because AAA pitching in 2021 was the worst it's ever been. Like it just an absolute words I'm not allowed to say on the podcast show.
Right.
It was really bad. So I was like, boy, I really like to see this. And then I was I try not to be a victim of the small sample, but he looked lost over those 52 plate appearances. I think he was 6 for 52 to start out the season. It was something along those lines where he just didn't. My concern with him is that the approach at the plate is just awful. Like he's in the bottom 10 percentile in walk, chase rate 32nd percentile. Not a guy. Now, he makes a lot of contact. He's a good bad ball hitter, but I think he could be a guy who has some seasons where he's going to be relying a lot on BABIP because he's just not a guy who is going to make pitchers work. at this point. Now, that could change, especially as pitchers begin to fear him. I think that's a really interesting one. I'll go Pascalentino just because, one, I like saying his name a little better. All due respect to Miranda. I watched Sex and the City as a kid. That's something that was a part of my life. But I do think just Pascalentino's approach at the plate just gives me a slight edge. Let's talk about some pitching, George. Dustin May made his debut for the 2020 season and was ridiculous. I'm going to ask you a question for those who play in Fab Leagues. It is August 21st. It's 12:55 my time as we're recording. Is this a person that you use all of your Fab for if he's still available?
Yes, he shouldn't be available. He should have been rostered weeks ago. He made 5 starts in the minor leagues on a rehab assignment. And he was striking out like 6-10 guys per start down there. It wasn't a skills issue. It was, all right, we need to build up the stamina of the pitch count.
Sure.
We knew the timeline for him to come back. And then when you saw the matchup against Miami, who's just been absolutely, to use your terminology, a phrase we can't say on the show, they've been pretty bad. So we knew this was coming. So yeah, I can't imagine he's out there in competitive leagues. But if he is, this is you push all the chips to the center of the table. This is why you stash, top elite tier talent. This is why we talk about these guys for weeks, months leading in, because if they do get the opportunity, which the sort of season-ending injuries to Walker Buehler, Clayton Kershaw getting hurt again, Andrew Heaney's banged up again, there's an opportunity for him to come in and pitch every 5-6 days. So he's going to do well. The strikeout upside is pretty stratospheric. So that sort of buoys the floor for him, where he might give up a couple of runs, but if he's striking out 8 guys in 5 innings, like, you'll take that every time.
It's still insane to me that there was concerns about Dustin May missing bats. And I realized that they weren't there when it first came up, but it's just like watching him pitch. It's like, how can you, by the way, can you guess what his availability is in Yahoo leagues?
No, Yahoo. It's got to be over, I'll say like 40%.
So it's 69% rostered now. Now, it was 55 yesterday, and it went up to almost 70% after he gets up. By the way,
what were the why wouldn't you have, if you had sort of a fringe talent on your right, why wouldn't you have? That's what I never figured out, because this isn't a talent issue. It's like we knew who Dustin May was.
I think some of it is just due to the fact that most guys are only carrying a couple of pitchers on their bench at most, but it's hard for me to justify him not being one of those guys unless you're just stacked with pitching. Congratulations if you are so good that Dustin May wasn't a guy who was good enough for you. By the way, Dustin May's next start is coming against the Marlins as well, this time in Miami. Yeah, you want him rostered for that start as well.
I love dynasty and keeper league questions. They're like, should I keep Dustin May? I have Justin Verlander, Garrett Cole, and Shohei Ohtani. It's like, okay, I love those questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Good for you, buddy.
Yeah, classy problem to have.
Speaking of starters, and speaking of the fact that Dustin May will be making his next start, 2-start options. I believe we talked before that this is not necessarily the greatest week for 2-start options, but give us some anyway, George.
No, it's really not. I was looking through this, and basically streaming is difficult. You need the right sort of combination of factors. You need good ballpark, bad lineup.
Yeah.
You just kind of need a lot of things to go right when you're doing this. So the kind of 2 guys who stood out to me. One, I'm not sure. He probably got rostered in a lot more leagues based on his recent performance and the fact that he was a top pitching prospect of the game. But Edward Cabrera, he's been really good since he's come back. He had a weird sort of recovery timeline because there was this sort of like nebulous timeline of when he was pitching in the minor leagues and coming back from an injury. So it was kind of unexpected that he came back earlier this month. It wasn't clear what his timeline was. Going back towards like the All-Star break, but he's made 3 starts since August 5th, and he has not allowed a run in those starts. He's thrown 14 2/3 consecutive scoreless innings with 21 strikeouts and only 7 walks. So yeah, he's pitching extremely well. This might be a hot streak. The control, the command, it's more command. The command is spotty at times.
Yes.
He'll have some starts where he'll go like 3 2/3 and walk 5 guys, and you're just going to shake your head. But the talent is immense, and the raw stuff is excellent. So he's been commanding it really well lately. And these were kind of weaker lineups, the Cubs, Phillies, Padres. So not great lineups, but he gets this week the Athletics on Monday.
Oh, great lineup.
Win. Great. And then the second one is tough because it's the Dodgers on Sunday, but it's a Sunday getaway day.
Should face some backups.
I kind of like the situation there. And when you factor, like, those are the sort of like extra factors on the side that could come into play there. So I like Cabrera there. The other name I'm going to throw out is Drew Smiley. He's allowed 2 runs over his last 3 starts, which is 17 innings. Only he has 17 strikeouts and 3 walks during that span. And once again, bad lineup. So there you go back to it. He had the Marlins, the Reds, and the Nationals. So this week he gets the Cardinals on Monday and then at the Brewers on Saturday. I just think the strikeouts have been there lately for Smiley, and he's been healthy. So in a week where there aren't a lot of great options, I think he can go out and give you 2 decent starts.
Yeah.
And he's probably out there in a lot of leagues on the waiver wire. So those were the 2 that kind of stood out to me. I didn't want to get into, like, you have a lot of risky names out there. Like Roense Contreras is one where, like, the talent is kind of there, but he's such a risky guy that, like,
very volatile.
Yeah, I couldn't do it this week. So
no, that's totally fair. I like that Cabrera pick a lot. Even with the Dodger game, I think you're going to see him feast on that Oakland lineup, because I've seen everybody feast on that Oakland lineup. Even Logan Gilbert, who wasn't particularly great yesterday, was able to pile up some decent stats until he fell apart a little bit. I'm very concerned about Logan Gilbert, by the way. Like, not for the long term, but for in the short term, there's just so much hard contact being given up. But that is a tangent that I'll go on another podcast.
Yeah, we talked about him last time, but
we did.
Can I get your take real quick? Because I haven't heard it maybe, but Jose Suarez, the Angels, he's been, like, really, really good lately. I keep going back and, like, man, this guy's awesome. Like,
he was really
kind of decent.
But. Yeah, he was really good against Seattle in that last start until things kind of fell apart a little bit. Took a perfect game into the 6th inning, in fact, on that. I like him. My concern is if you're looking for W's, I'm not counting on a lot of them from the Los Angeles, Anaheim, Temecula, whatever the heck they're called, Angels. I'm not counting on a whole heck of a lot of those, but I think he can put up decent rates. If he's available in a league, I absolutely would be looking at. I'm also looking at this guy, George, and I believe you wrote this guy up not too long ago. For those of you who are looking for help in the relief category, Alexis Diaz, still available in 63% of Yahoo leagues. I feel like that's a mistake.
Oh, absolutely. It's become clear that the Reds want to sort of transition him to the closer role. They've given Hunter Strickland the occasional opportunity, but not totally committing to him. So Diaz missed some time back in June, and he came back on July 8th. So since that point, he has allowed 1 run in 16 2/3 innings with 27 strikeouts and only 6 walks. And he also has 3 saves during that span. So he got charged with 1 blown save because he came in with guys on base and gave up a hit, and it was like the 7th inning. So that's a little deceptive if you're just looking at box scores. So yeah, Diaz, he throws hard. He's been very good, and I can't envision a scenario in which he doesn't get the remaining save chances in Cincinnati. So that's definitely a guy long-term you want to be prioritizing. He's someone to put on your, like, sleeper list for next year. I think just because, like you said, the Reds are so bad, people are going to overlook him. But the skills are absolutely there for him to be an elite reliever moving forward.
You know what's funny about the Reds, and I totally agree with everything you just said. I look at that pitching staff, and there's a lot of, I kind of like that guy. Oh, I kind of like that guy. Oh, I really like that guy. Oh, I kind of like that guy. There's also Mike Minor and Ross Detweiler and those type of guys, and Hunter Strickland, who you just mentioned. But, like, even without Hunter Green on this roster, like, you look at Graham Ashcraft. Oh, that's kind of interesting. Justin Dunn, who I still think can, in some sort of role, be a successful major leaguer. Nick Lodolo, Art Warren, who is a guy that I like as a reliever as well. Might get a couple of save chances down the stretch as well, but I think Alexis Diaz. But it's just kind of funny for a team that got off to such a horrific start. Their talent's a little better than I think people give them credit for.
Yeah, they just got crushed by injuries this year.
Huge. The injured list like if you go and look at our MLB injury report, which I recommend you do because it's a great way to see who is on the injured list and some expected ETAs. I want to say they take up about a page and a half because there are just so many guys. Now, a lot of those guys have come off the injured list, but even still, there are just so many injuries. They're not good, but they are not nearly as bad as they looked at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, they started out with a lot of injuries. Early on in the season, we do the updates on the new player news, and it's like, man, it would take like hours to do the Reds. But TJ Antone's a guy who I think they were counting on to come back and play a role this year.
Great call.
Didn't come back. So, they have a lot of interesting arms that just kind of got hurt or didn't pan out this year. So, yeah, I think going forward, that's a team that could take a step forward. It's kind of unclear what direction they're going in because they kind of are straddling the line between like a total rebuild and like trying to semi-contend. They're in a weird place. I haven't totally figured it out yet.
I think you're going to see them move towards more tearing down, but they might be a fun team to watch while doing the teardown, despite having a horrific owner.
It's moves like, why are you signing Tommy Pham and Donovan Solano? Like stuff like that, where it's like, why is Mike Moustakas here? Like it's stuff like that where it's like, I can understand building around Tyler Stevenson, Jonathan India, great, but like I don't know what some of the veterans are doing on that team when they signed them early this year.
By the way, they also have Buck Farmer, and you do not spoonerize that name. That's going to do it for us. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us, either via YouTube, Twitch, or listening to the podcast. We really appreciate it. Please hit the like button, subscribe button, 5-star buttons. We appreciate all of that. You can follow me at Crawford_MILB. And you can follow George Bissell at George Bissell, S and L. If you search for George Biss, I'm sure it's going to come up anyway, but it is nice to know that you need that S and you need that L. Stay tuned on Wednesday for a podcast featuring George Bissell, who has done a lot of these podcasts. I'm starting to wonder if you do anything else, George. Do you just podcast? Is there anything else going on in your life?
Yeah, pretty much. I feel like I'm living on this screen. Sending questions. Help.
Yes. Yeah. We really do appreciate it. So until next time, have a great rest of August. Is it really the end of August already? That's crazy.
1 week.
Thanks so much. One more week. Let's have this is a train wreck ending. Bye.